Good morning, everybody. Food security, food insecurity. Why in the heck is everything so expensive today? Well, last night I was shopping at the local grocery outlet, which is kind of at the bottom of the food chain in terms of buying groceries and things like that, at least in my city of Santa Rosa here in Northern California. And I looked over at the egg case last night, and I could not believe $8.49 or $8.99 for a dozen eggs. And people just came over and looked at that. I observed some people shopping, and they're just like shaking their head. Well, there goes eggs. Let's get into this today. This is a real situation we have here, and it has real roots in what I call the consolidation of the food industry, particularly in the West here. Let's get into that today. And once again, a very good morning to you. A lot of people have been interested and intrigued by this series I've begun here in late 2024 and 2025, talking about some of the issues that face us here in modern life and trying to make sense of them from I don't want to say a simplistic point of view, because if you talk about simplistic, you're insulting people in your audience. Let's say in a way that makes sense, that you can grab onto and say, yeah, okay, I understand that. That's a great reason why. Much has changed, of course, in agriculture and farming in the world. And for one thing, it's become much more scientific over the last 100 years or so. When Luther Burbank, over here a few blocks from me on Main Street in Santa Rosa, California, was experimenting of how to make a better russet potato, or how to make more beautiful flowers, or how to get more yield from plum trees, or greater crop production from things like blueberries, raspberries. Very, very pioneering work. But as that work developed, it became more technically demanding that a guy just sitting out in a greenhouse would no longer be able to do that. We started reducing food operations and research down to test tubes and things like that. What's the best growing media? How can we enrich the soil to have larger crop production? You see the fruits of this borne out every day, and not just in plants, but in animals too. Look at the size. You go to a store these days and you see that apples on sale for $2.99 a pound, $3.99 organic, and you look at the size of this thing and it's like a softball today. And you think to yourself, well, I'm basically paying $2.99 or $3.99 a pound. I'm only getting one apple for that these days, so I'm paying through the nose for something that I really, really used to enjoy in a small hand-sized piece of fruit. You look at things like chickens are a great example of that. I mean, the average farmer or chicken rancher today, if somebody from the 1940s or 50s stepped in today and brought his chickens to market, next to these big, gigantic Franken chickens that are in the marketplace today, these huge 4 or 5 pound chickens, the average 1 pound fryer or whatever from the 1940s, man, you don't have a hope of hitting the market with those things anymore. Just on visuals alone, forget about the hormones that they're pumped with and the diets and all that stuff. It makes the breed of chickens less and less resistant to disease and things going forward. So we have the rise of diseases like avian flu, and all that can just dissipate and ultimately lead to eggs at $8.49 a dozen. Well, we're kind of used to that now. People just shake their head and say, oh, you know, it's life today. But another factor that's really behind this, there's 2 other major factors that are behind this too. And with that amount of research that I talked about in development in laboratories by Pioneer Seed, and which was a spin-off of DuPont, and all these major agricultural conglomerates here, The levels of research needed to sustain and fight back, like against weeds and things like that, that grow resistant to new varieties of seed over time. And they have to keep figuring out ways to build pesticides into the seed so they can kind of take care of themselves. But the problem is that nature pushes back over time, right? And the genes and the strains become weaker. And if you're not able to plant that type of seed in the following year, maybe you can't afford it, maybe it's not available or whatever, due to God knows what. But you go back and you go back to your shed and you go to pull out a bag of old seed from 1950. Oh, maybe this is nice and dry. Maybe this will work, right? You put that in the ground and that stuff is absolutely decimated, and disease runs rampant in your field. Well, it looks like Grant was rolling through Richmond there, right? I mean, it's a real horror show. That's really what we risk with food security, is we've cut off this chain of natural selection that, yes, it causes ups and downs over times of production and sometimes horrendous famines in the world. But we've lost the ability of genes and the physiological composition of plant matter to be able to strengthen itself naturally over time. What that does, of course, is it's extend the growing regions where they would not naturally be. And that's the problem. Having boosted up food production through the wonders of science and chemicals, if things become too expensive, or if you have some type of catastrophic disease or something that hits growing areas, you have a rapid or climate change and you can't afford those fancy weather protected seeds anymore, the amount of growing area shrinks dramatically and food prices go up as a result. There's really no escaping that. And that's the downside of that. Just like in human beings, the more we engineer to try to have health and things like that, the worse suited we become to face the future, and the more physically weak we become with endemic diseases like diabetes and things like that that are now really starting to shape a reduction in life and lifespans, right? That natural selection part of things, which is so critical for evolving a more durable species, disappears. We only need to imagine what would happen to the supply of, what would happen to people if the supply of injectables and things like that, insulins and things like that, were to disappear, or pharmacological medications were to disappear over say a 5-year period. The population would be absolutely decimated here. It would have no ability to withstand the rigors of the full onslaught of nature onto humans that have now been amazingly weakened. But let's get back to food. That's a topic for another discussion. And if you're not subscribed, this is a good time to ask you to subscribe and hit that bell for all notifications. We'd like to go a little deeper below the surface here and get into some of the realities of the problems that plague us today. The second big factor is the corporatization, of course, of agriculture. And this has been an ongoing thing since the 1930s, when profits are very big, as they were perceived to be in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. And more and more farmers are kicked out of farming, and they sell their property to these mega farming combines, these huge organizations that farm on a vast scale of thousands and thousands and thousands of acres, right? This corporatization means that agricultural prices are subject to fewer and fewer what I call competitive offsites here. If 10,000 farmers are growing corn, right, it's pretty sure that the price is going to be, the price over time will be the average cost of production plus a profit, and enough to reinvest in the business and equipment and stuff like that. But people ain't going to be rich. The rich farmers really only a recent phenomenon due to the economy of scale in some of these farming operations. But all that competition, all those people fighting for the best price for per bushel for number 2 yellow corn at the Illinois railhead or whatever, it's all going to be competitive. But if you only have 1, 2, or 3 major competitors, well, as I've said before in the last video, my competitor is my friend, right? We have kind of a unspoken agreement that we'll just keep the price at a level. Okay, it'll be a little tough for a couple of years, but we got this market. We got a hammer lock on this market. And that's to a great extent what's occurred in agriculture today. We don't have that pushback of large numbers of individuals that can set a competitive price in the marketplace. And we see that in like pork production, where Tyson and Smithfield, I'm not sure ConAgra, another one, they control the whole like pork market now. And they make it impossible for the individual small farmer to compete because they control the price and they are able to influence the market and do things on a scale of production that an individual farmer can't hope to achieve anymore. And therein lies the real problems, that the more consolidated a particular industry comes, the more likely it is to not be subjected to competitive pressures. Back in the old days, if pig farming was profitable, you'd have pig farmers would expand their crop of piglets and grow and bring more to market. But nowadays, that's not the case because they can't achieve the economies of scale to get that pork at a competitive price to themselves to make it work. Not to mention the fact that because of environmental regulations and things like that, the ability to just have a slaughterhouse and not be visited by PETA and local agricultural individuals and rules and regulations, people that don't understand a thing about food production, but it'll be in there protesting and causing problems, and the waste that you deal with that, and you can understand it brings a whole new dimension that number one, you're never going to get zoning, and I see it in my particular county down here. That we've had a beef processing place. It's finally under the name of Marin Sun. They've lit the place on fire over the years. They've had massive protests outside. They've gone inside over years and destroyed equipment and all that, right? To the point that they're the last operation standing here in really 2 counties that's able to process the independent growers' product. And as far as mobile slaughterhouses, forget about it, right? Good luck getting a license on that. So once again, this control we have this centralization of power, of market power, that would have been absolutely unknown before. And this is one reason why your food prices go high and they stay high. Because the hands of fighting back through production, a free market, the invisible hands are tied now, okay? Because the industry has been so consolidated through regulation, environmental, political, ethical thought, right? Economies of scale, money, land, competition with big corporate growers. You understand, okay? The ability to adjust those prices to changing economic conditions amongst people, i.e. their ability to afford to buy that, is not impacted anymore, right? There's no more relief from them of, prices can go down because the purchasing power is not there anymore. No, we can just ship it overseas or whatever and sell what we can't sell here. We'll just sell that overseas. So it doesn't matter the demand side of the equation so much here anymore because, if you don't want to buy it, somebody else will buy it, and that's the way it is. That's why you have beef at $8.99, $9.99. $12.99 a pound. The days I remember as a kid, my mother would send me over to that meat case with 100 ladies in Baltimore City at the Great Atlantic and Pacific, the A&P. Get in there and get those round steaks are on sale for today for 99 cents a pound. Get in there underneath those ladies. Full disclosure, I loved it. It was fun being in that scrum and that melee. The other factor you have to realize when it comes to food costs is you have a huge demand side competitor here. And that competitor is the United States government. The Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health and Human Services, right? You have massive food banks and things like that take in enormous amounts of food and redistribute them. And I know in my particular area, I see every Tuesday that big 18-wheeler comes down into the public park and it unloads all that food and people just show up willy-nilly, right? Non-means tested or whatever, and just take that food that's been donated and just distribute it out to anybody that just chooses to show up and pick that up. So it's really not, it's not a situation, it creates a situation where everybody gets served whether they need it or not. And then these massive food banks can turn around and say, well, look at our demand, right? It's go through the roof. We just can't keep up with all of this, Well, a lot of that is by design. And the other thing too, with the government handing out what we used to call food stamps, it's now EBT benefits and things like that. You're also competing when you're buying food. You're competing with all the people that basically get that at no or subsidized, no cost or low cost by the United States government. And this is tens of billions of dollars of purchasing power at the grocery store level that would never be there. That would never be there otherwise if it weren't for the United States government giving it out basically for free for food security. And don't get it twisted. We're not making an ethical judgment on we're just talking about things on a purely economic basis here as to why food costs are so high. Because your biggest competitor, the person that's scarfing down the most, is the United States government and also individual state governments too. You're competing with them on a grocery store level, but the big difference is that they're being subsidized for their purchases that are using the EBT cards. And remember, there's no ethical judgment. It is reality. And you have to go out, earn a paycheck, pay taxes on that paycheck, take that money, come into a grocery store, and, well, we can call your money sort of the sweat of the brow, right? And you're going in and competing with that. That's another thing that's majorly upset the supply and demand equation when it comes to the gross cost of groceries and feeding ourselves. And just in general, the whole purchasing power of the United States government and other ones we'll be talking about too in a future field have put a lot of pressure on working class people, uneconomic pressure that wouldn't be there, right, if they weren't in there buying and off-taking with a large degree of demand what's produced by our society, particularly our farming sector. It carries an extreme price to it. And one of those prices is people that get subsidized or get it for free can oftentimes look at things like, well, I'll just buy the best or whatever because, well, it's not, because I got the money and I'm going to buy the very best. Whereas people that are working for a living have to be much more circumspect with how they spend their money because they're really not sure next month if they'll be able to buy groceries and things like that. So you see two different mindsets here in the marketplace. It's just the basic idea in economics. If you get something for free, it doesn't have the value placed on it, whether it's housing or whatever, food, that somebody that's working by the sweat of their brow puts on that. So there, my friends, are the big factors that have now conspired to bring a point where we have almost a monopolistic setup in the food industry now, and one that very few people at ground level are even aware of. And therein lies the real tragedy. It wasn't done by some secret manipulations behind the smoke-filled rooms here. It was done as a natural consequence to the tremendous profits that are to be made in agriculture now. Didn't used to be that way, right? Farming was kind of a hard scrabble existence for a family farm, but oh my, what a difference it is now for corporate farming operations, right? And the more they get in, the more pressure goes onto the small farmer, and the more our food prices are locked in at a high level. Well, there it is. That's my opinion on that. Food prices, one of the big issues that faces us as we go into the 21st century here. I welcome your opinions down below. What do you think? Some of the outrageous examples that you've seen in pricing, and what do you think dictates that? We've basically tied and shackled the hands of a free market to respond the way it used to. This is why prices go high and stay high. Once again, if you're not subscribed, subscribe and hit the bell for all notifications. Your thumbs up is appreciated. And if you enjoyed this, why not share it out with others in your family, friends, and social media? Give other people an idea, a way to stimulate their thinking a little bit and think a little bit outside the box. It's not enough to say food prices are high because people are greedy, all right? Right, that's always been a human condition. Nothing new there. But there's other forces at work that I think people would appreciate hearing about. Thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.